Monster RX93.1 presents Heard on Thursdays. Hot conversations on hot topics. Your host, Nikki Porter.
Services and his participation in President Barack Obama's technology and innovation team focused on modernizing public safety and communications. Ishka, on the other hand, is the CFO and the NGA Philippines president. She is a Filipino techpreneur who worked to bring the United States 911 emergency response technology to the country 3 years ago at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic through NGA 911. It has been her vision to establish the 911 system in the Philippines, the first outside the U.S., and even ahead of other states. So heard on Thursdays, let's welcome to the show Don Ferguson and Ishka Villacisneras of NGA 911. Hello!
Hello.
Hello and good evening. So I wanted to ask, for Don specifically, why the interest in public safety communications? What brought you to that industry?
My background is in technology. So it started from a technology perspective, and of course we are based in the Los Angeles. And really what we saw was that technology was growing faster in the United States than 911 was evolving. So there were issues about how calls were routed and how location could be delivered, and that was in the United States just a little bit over a decade ago. There was a time when cell phones were not so prevalent, and the 911 system in the United States was catching up with those new technologies. So the real appeal with 911, so coming from technology, and the appeal of 911 is that you have a very real impact on people's lives. You actually, with building and deploying technology, you have the opportunity to save many lives every day. And that's probably the biggest appeal of this particular technology in this specific industry.
Yeah, and you also have patents for emergency call routing and services. So what were some of the pain points that, you know, that in which your patents addressed to improve on that?
Well, the real painful part of that was actually filing for the patent. It's a very painful process.
Got it.
The dentist is a piece of cake compared to trying to file a patent. So as we went through this process of really modernizing, it's called Next Generation 911. So it's not 911 and the shows back in the 70s and the 80s, and there have been many, really were based off of a legacy technology. So what we brought to 911 is Next Generation 911. And this is where you're digitizing everything. So when I looked at it, we had to figure out how we get from an old technology, which is based on landlines and copper wires, and get them into a digitized infrastructure. And so really crafting that out, created something very new, novel, and then we figured, hey, this is new and novel, and probably no one's done this before, so why not file a patent? And if we've done one patent, let's do another patent. So there's two. There's one for where it started for me, which is a very personal place. There's a patent for more along the lines of personal safety.
Okay.
So what we imagine here at NGA, where this is going, we're not there yet. We're not there in the U.S. yet. We're not there in the Philippines yet. We will get there. But what we imagine is a situation where you need help. You press a button, or you dial 911 on your phone, and this is the first patent, the personal emergency response. And within a few seconds, everyone who knows, loves, and cares about you is alerted that you need help, and they're brought on to perhaps a conference bridge that allows you to get help from them. And given that it's integrated with 911, what it allows you to do is to connect the first responder as well.
Right.
So you get the professionals that can dispatch police, fire, and EMS, and you get people who know you that can give additional context or situational awareness to who you are.
Got it.
Because when you need help, you really want everything known about you. You want so you can get the right emergency response, and that's what that first patent covers. It's all about getting a massive response specifically to you, when and where you need it. That's the short of it. And then the second one is a little bit more technical. It goes up to how do we get your situation routed to the nearest and the most qualified and the most available first responder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's that would be also very helpful once we have that more prevalent here in different LGUs as well. And for Ishka, I actually want to ask, what brought on, like, quote unquote, a frustration for you to bring 911 here, like the concept of 911 here?
Well, it was actually a very personal experience for me, because 911 saved my Lola's life several times, including my Lolo, my grandma, and my grandpa. And I felt very lucky and actually blessed to have that technology in the U.S. because I know that when we have emergencies here, you would just probably book a taxi or have someone drop you off the hospital. I wouldn't even think of calling a number before.
Right.
Yeah, because if that happened, that emergency happened over here, I think my grandparents wouldn't survive. So I'm like, I wanted to bring that technology to the Philippines and, you know, save more lives, because all of us would have a Lolo and a Lola, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so now I want to know, how did this partnership come about? Because you're both on the same page and, like, wanting to save lives and wanting to make people more accessible to emergency responders and all of that. So how did this partnership come about? Like, who approached who, or?
Well, it started in the U.S. And in the U.S., we started to bring the old system into Next Generation 911, and doing that together in NGA 911, which is a Los Angeles-based company. So we picked up a few contracts, a few states in the U.S., and we started doing it there. And really getting a rhythm and a clear understanding how we could really upgrade the U.S. 911 system.
And we actually won the largest 911 contract in the United States, which is the state of California.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then you seeing that led you
and me seeing that is like, I feel like I want to bring this back to my home country, because I was born and raised here. I wanted everyone here to experience that same security I'm feeling over there.
So I remember the phone call from Ishka. She asked me, hey, do you mind if we bring this to the Philippines? Which was an odd question, because obviously it's 911. We believe that our 911 service should be worldwide. Philippines is so near and dear to Ishka's heart that, of course, we ought to bring it to the Philippines. And so,
And on top of that, this is actually the first next-gen 911 Southeast Asian country that we've implemented or using the next-gen 911 technology.
and it started with, if you remember, you flew here and you were traveling all over.
Yeah, I had
I
no
don't know.
connections. Just so you know, I just went from like one city hall to the other, and then I ended up with DILG,
Wow.
and then presented this.
Yeah.
And they were like, "We love that technology. Thank you for bringing it here."
Yeah,
It's
but-
amazing. I love that. I mean, like the persistence, of course, of like, for someone to actually listen, and then for someone to actually, you hear back from someone, or DILG, especially getting that accreditation was huge. And so, how has the process been? So you brought it during the height of the pandemic. So how was that process like, considering it was the pandemic? Was there any barriers to entry?
So we started in 2019 actually, and we were trying to do a few like proof of concepts, but it's very hard to bring this to the country if we actually live in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I had so many flights going here, and I'd say that it's just very hard because Filipinos, they want to meet in person. They didn't want to do virtual, right?
Right.
So I needed to fly in here at the height of the pandemic because we were setting up our test lab for a proof of concept, which lasted 12 months. Yeah. And then after that, we got accredited. We passed all of the tests, compliances, and the ILG gave us the accreditation certificate.
And so your first implementation, was it in Rizal? You mentioned, and so how, like, were there statistics, like, before actually putting up that command center? Were there statistics on how they were responding to emergency situations, and then seeing the difference of like how like the NGA technology changed all that?
So I think with Rizal and with Alaminos, these are smaller populations, and it was the vision of the mayor and the center that really created that. And what that allowed us to do is to build out the infrastructure for 911. So even if you stand up one center, you still have to, we had to go out and we had to build out the entire infrastructure for that would cover the country.
Sure.
So that was the catalyst for us to build out the 911 system. And by that I mean it's all telecommunications infrastructure. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. That's the magic that happens behind the curtain. And that really led up to, along with the certification and the leadership inside of DILG, led us up into the Philippines National Police, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
But really those stats and those differences that this technology is making are now being seen very clearly in the Philippines National Police deployment. And I'm not sure if you want to talk to the response time and the quality, et cetera. Go ahead.
Yeah, so previously the response time, the average was about an hour and a half.
Ooh.
And then our first live call, they were able to respond to that incident in just 4 minutes.
Wow.
U.S. standards.
Gosh.
I love it.
As compared to an hour and a half.
Yeah.
My goodness.
That's the average.
Yeah.
And you asked why this, why this, right? There is that first call that Ishka is referring to really sums it up. So there is something in public safety that firemen, policemen, and then providers of technology to public safety sort of share in common. It's unspoken. It's hard to explain, but it's in your DNA. There is this instinct to protect, and then there's this pleasure that you get out of having succeeded in protecting someone.
Yeah.
That's the dynamic that's at play. So one of these calls that came in to the Philippines National Police was a woman that was under duress, we'll say. A man was banging on her home, trying to get in her home. Clearly something that was not going to have a good outcome. And also because why am I banging on your home if not to do something
Right.
to you? And if you can imagine this woman sitting at home and having, out of nowhere, and it was at night, right? Someone, all of a sudden, the banging, what do you do? How, what number do you call? What do you do? How do you handle it?
Yeah.
So that call landed, and because of the improved system, the responders were there inside of 4 minutes. And because they were there that quick, you have successful outcomes.
Yeah. And I can only imagine with that first call from Rizal, it's like as soon as you were able to help one, I can only imagine like the next thought is like, how many more can I save from like this point forward with just this one call? Because you said there is pleasure in in that success of like actually helping, protecting someone, saving someone's life as well. And so was it strategic for it to be like Morong and Rizal and Alaminos and Pangasinan to start small first before moving forward to much larger LGUs?
Yeah, it had to be. This is 911, so 911 for us is very different from any other technology. Any one of these calls into 911 could be that young lady who needs help at the moment that she needs help. Every call must get through. And that's the bar that is set in the United States. And that's why any traveler or any person in the U.S. Knows to dial 911 because there's a built-up trust that when I dial 911, I'm going to get the response that I need. Easier said than done. The technology that needs to be built to ensure that all the magic behind the curtain happens and it never goes down, like you can't have any outages, means that at a minimum, everything you do is done in pairs. Everything you do is done redundant.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you need to, so imagine, I think the equivalent would be, is at home you have a television set. That television set can never go down. So you have two of them. Because as soon as that one goes down, the other one turns on.
Okay.
And then while the backup is running, you're taking the one that broke and you're replacing it immediately. So you're always in a state of having redundancy.
Yeah.
So in order to achieve that here in the Philippines, and to make sure that that mission is accomplished, you have to do it at a smaller scale.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to put a larger population at risk as you work out the kinks, so to speak. So yes, it was very strategic to start smaller, and then you needed to have and find those mayors and those DILGs that shared the vision and shared the passion and saw the vision.
Yeah, for sure. And so, it's a good thing that you were able to find these cities for you to implement those command centers, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that you get to implement to much larger LGUs, for example, in the major cities that have like business districts or are far more congested as well, and to see how that actually works out, considering the traffic also during rush hour. And that's something that on a personal note, it's frustrating to see an ambulance that just like in traffic. And it was maybe just a few years ago that we actually started learning to move to the side to make way for them. And so, but then still, it's still sometimes it's like it's just a traffic jam for sure. And so, with regard to, for those who are not familiar, the monsters who are listening and watching also on our live stream, what are the examples of distress or duress that in which someone should call 911? Because 911 is live now here in the Philippines.
It is live, and the situation that we shared happened here in Manila, so high population center.
Gosh.
So all of that kind of proving out in the more rural areas now has brought 911 live here in Manila. So I think the rule of thumb in when, basically in the U.S., I was trained at a very young age in school, they tell us, dial 911. When in doubt or when you feel uncomfortable, dial 911. And everyone has a different threshold for that. But I think the first time that I was educated about using 911 was probably in 2nd grade. And so you have many examples of young children that have saved their parents.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Because they know that the situation's not right, or it's not comfortable, or you just have a sense about things. So I think that's the rule. If it doesn't seem right, doesn't seem comfortable, dial 911. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for us here, like for me growing up, I don't think I really knew what the numbers were. I think it was 117 up until recently, of course. And then they would always post all of these hotlines when it comes to emergency or like disaster, or just like moments of typhoon or landslide or something. They would post all of these numbers, but it's like, what happens when you don't have access to that list of numbers? So 911, you're saying, is the number to dial no matter what in terms of like distress, if there's disaster, if there's someone injured, that's the number to dial here in Manila, because some of us might still be dubious at the fact that you can't dial 911 here. Yeah.
I see something suspicious, a crime in progress, I have a motorcycle accident, I'm at home, like this young lady, and feel uncomfortable. 911. It's that simple. Okay. And then the other aspect of what we're doing is taking some of the learning out of the U.S. to handle the use cases or the types of calls that come into the 911 command center, so that because you can get a call from anything that's very mild to something that's incredibly severe. And the dispatchers need to know how to handle the simple and the even more difficult cases.
So I want to know then, like what is the training like if you're a dispatcher? Like how, for one thing, I know you have to be calm when you're answering these calls. That's the first thing I would know.
You cannot freak out.
Exactly. But apart from that, like what is the training that you require for those who are going to be dispatchers here in the command centers and the LGUs? How long does it take as well?
I can talk for the training in the U.S. I don't know if you're.
I think that's the standard we're trying to bring in here. So
yeah, so I can talk to the U.S. These dispatchers will go between 6 to 9 months of training. There's some standard curriculums. It is an incredible job, so we're encouraging, as you see 911 unfold here in the Philippines, you're going to find that there's more opportunities to become a dispatcher, which is an incredible role. You have the chance to save someone's life every moment. And this training is more it's standard, it's international standards. You have to have also the sort of the personality for it. Because I remember I was in one of the states that we're deployed in is Louisiana, and I went to Louisiana and was in their command center. And very large command center. There's so much going on in Louisiana, gunshots, and you just feel the energy when you're there. And I remember I was on my way. We had finished what we were doing. I was on my way walking out when I heard out of my left ear, "Is the baby breathing?"
Wow.
So, and at that point, you realize that one of the dispatchers was dealing with a situation that dealt with an infant, and who knows, what all the details were. But you have to have you have to have the personality. You got to be built for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier it's in your DNA to want to help, to want to protect, and to save a life or something like that. So for sure. And so is it a volunteer, or is it like a full-time kind of job that you're looking for in these command centers in the LGUs?
These are all full-time.
These are all full-time jobs.
Okay.
I think when a the Philippines is blessed with such a wide variety of natural disasters?
In some way.
You have every one.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, what was the city, Legazpi, that we went up and we landed, and I'm looking at the volcano saying,
Yeah, Legazpi.
why do they have that city so close to that volcano? I mean, it's not enough that you've got typhoons and earthquakes, but hey, let's put a city right next to a volcano to really test Mother Nature.
Actually, when we were going through the POC, the proof of concept, I remember calling Don saying, Don, there's a typhoon. We just had an earthquake,
Yes.
and the volcano just erupted, but I'm fine. And he was like, get yourself out there. I said, no, I'm fine, really.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah, for a lot of us, it's we've been used to, like, you know, floodings and everything. Seeing, I used to live in Marikina, so we were right by the river.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that my house is on an inclined street, so it's like you can see the river like raging when after a whole typhoon has just passed, or while a typhoon is still there. So it's pretty intense. We've been exposed to a lot of things here.
You are.
Yeah.
I can tell you, you are like I said, you're blessed. So I think there's a couple levels. I think there's these full-time dispatchers that are professionals and well-trained and well-drilled, and it's a 9 to 5. Actually, it's a little bit different. It's probably 12-hour shift. But they're really trained and they know what they're doing. And then I think that's supplemented because you have so many of these disasters. There's probably a supplemental part-time group that can come in and can help when disaster strikes.
And they have volunteers as well during the
And then
typhoons.
volunteers.
Yeah, I've been
Okay.
following
Yeah.
that.
And that's part of where we want to land. You know, you have 911 and you start to really normalize protocols when these situations strike.
Yeah, for sure. And while we're talking about, like, you know, typhoons, very recently we did have Karina. And so for those command centers that are operational, did you receive any, like, stories or have any feedback from the command centers and how they dealt with it, or like what the calls were like during that time?
The call volume was like way higher actually. But then the response time, I think what the Philippines need to focus on is the response. They need to build a stronger response system because I don't think they have enough ambulances or police or,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can take the call, but you need to
Yes.
have enough first responders.
So we're rolling it out. One of the critical parts of this new next-gen system is location. So it is built into the Android devices that when you dial 911, the location is automatically presented to the dispatcher. So they know exactly where you are within a few meters.
Whether it's a landline or a cell phone?
Landline is pretty easy to get location on because it's fixed.
All
The
right,
more difficult one is cell phone.
because you're on moves. You can be on the move.
Because you're on the move,
Yeah.
right? So, so this, and for the Android devices, the Google devices, location is known at the time of the call, and it's reinitiated every 20 to 30 seconds.
I see.
So you can, and that location is actually streaming in. So, given that you have location, the response can be accelerated, and the protocols for response can be accelerated.
Yeah.
And you can dispatch, if you look at a map, you can dispatch responders that are closer to the
Right.
scenario. So really with location, you all of a sudden get an immediate improvement in response.
Yeah.
And that's where we're starting. So if you imagine, you had mentioned the typhoon that came through. So if someone needs help in a typhoon and you don't know their location, how do you help them?
So put it this way, if Grab or Food Panda can find you, why can't 911? Right?
That's a fair point. Yeah.
And that's what's being brought, so that
Yeah.
your location is known, so help can be delivered.
Yeah,
when
and I
needed.
feel that's always one of the first questions, like in a 911 call, that they ask you, right? Where are you? Where are you located?
Yes.
So that's pretty much from there. They can now see, as you mentioned, like, you know, who's the closest one, or what emergency response can like respond to this call or something. So like that is fairly important, and to get that information through Google, through technology, makes it a lot easier. And then connecting all of the dots basically that you need for an efficient response to that call. That's essentially what NGA 911 is.
That's what we do, exactly,
Yeah.
connecting all those dots,
Yeah.
all those various technologies that can be applied at that, remember, at that moment that you need it, right? At that moment where you are uncomfortable, that you see something that just doesn't feel right, and you dial that 911, you know that that person needs help or you need help, and we want to make sure that every possible technology, including cameras, including concerned citizens, are engaged to provide that overwhelming response when and where you need it.
Got it. And so I want to go back with the dispatchers as well. It's like, is there a usual process on like when you answer a call, what's the first thing that, okay, so for example, I'm saying 911, I have an emergency. What's usually the first question? It's where are you located, or?
Well, you want to treat very, very specific protocols. These protocols have been mastered over decades, right? So it's going to be 911. What's your emergency?
Okay, yeah.
Well, the cat is stuck in the tree.
Yeah.
In which case you want to say, please go get a ladder, get your cat down, and don't call us about that, right? Or I have chest pain. Okay, this could indicate heart attack. This means the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
That means you have to get them immediate attention, and it gets escalated. So you want to know what the situation is, because all of a sudden, based on the situation, it triggers a certain protocol.
Right.
And then, once you kind of got that, the dispatcher has that protocol locked in their head, they're going to get to, okay, where are you located? And they will ask, even though they know your location, they will still ask, where are you located, to make sure that it's validated.
Right, yeah.
Because then you need to get someone there to help them out. So 911, what's your emergency, and where are you located? And then, depending on the protocol, a heart attack, a break-in, kidnapping, right? Now that you have location, abduction, and those sorts of cases can actually be handled. So if there is a case for a kidnapping, then the dispatcher will follow that protocol, and you have a better chance for a successful outcome. So you follow the protocol, the situation then is monitored, and then finally, after the situation is done, there's sort of a summary or wrap-up that's done, so you can capture learning, and you move on. As a dispatcher, you move to the next one.
Right, yeah. There's no rest in between.
So you just got done handling a major kidnapping of a young child. You handled that successful, and then
Job's not done.
and then you're like, okay, compartmentalize that,
Yes.
moving on to the next one. These dispatchers are amazing people.
Yeah, so I'm assuming the protocols that you're referring to different situations, that's also what the dispatchers here are being trained to do, more or less.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I feel like this is bringing a lot more. What do you call this? It is bringing a lot more hope, I guess, in our emergency response here. But I also want to know. So, you mentioned that situation with the lady was in Manila as well. But in terms of, like, for example, requiring an ambulance, like what we mentioned earlier during rush hour, is there something that you have in mind to like mitigate that, or is it still really a resource problem that we're still trying to that you're trying to address as well?
I think every LGU is different because you'll be shocked that some LGUs actually have a lot of ambulances. Yeah, but they don't have the system yet. But then there's other LGUs that they really lack, police cars or first responders. Yeah, so that's something that I would say the mayors or the key executives should really focus on. Yeah, it really varies.
Yeah, what we have seen, there is mitigation. I mean, knowing your situation, understanding your response times and how to improve them.
Yeah.
The first step is know the location. Have clarity with the location. Great. Okay, got that. Now, what they do is they place ambulances across the municipality, right? So you can mitigate the risk of getting stuck in this bottleneck here if you've got ambulances that can be dispatched from here, 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 and here. And I think with the other aspect that we are bringing is call it the reflection upon the incidents that have occurred. So you want to look back and apply, in this case, AI will help to really dig into the outcomes that were achieved and how they were achieved and really improve the response. So I think getting location is a big help.
Yeah.
And then disbursement or spreading out your assets, knowing that certain arteries are going to be blocked will help to, I think, stabilize response or benchmark or provide a consistent response regardless of how much traffic is out there.
Yes, and making sure that we have enough human resources to
Yes.
actually man all those, all the areas in which they're all dispatched.
And that's part of it, yeah. And there is, believe it or not, there are patterns to 911. You can see them. There are certain peaks, there are certain valleys. There are certain times, like, for example, when the typhoon came in, we saw it, obviously, spike, not before, not during, but it was actually after. And you think about it, of course.
Right.
It makes sense. It's not during it because you're hunkered down and you're just wanting to ride the storm out.
Yeah.
It's the after. It's after people are now moving and the real wrath of the storm is now felt.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I feel like it's something that we definitely need to try and address, especially, the frequency of how many typhoons we have in a year. We go through the whole alphabet and then we kind of redo it if there's still a little bit more. But yeah, this disaster risk prevention is super helpful for those, but also observing that it's after makes a lot of sense too, because it's kind of like, because we are so used to it as Filipinos, we don't really, we kind of act after the fact that it's happened, and we're like, oh, we actually do need help. And so, so it's not until we actually see outside and it's like, how high the flood is, or that there's a tree that's blocking our streets and everything, that we actually do need some help. And so, yeah, and that data is very important as well to know, and for people to actually realize that it's okay to call 911 even if it's like not after, but even during.
Of course.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's part of the message here, and really, our thanks is to DILG. And there was an event this morning where the president went to announce this launch at the Philippines National Police. And it starts from the top. So President Marcos himself has launched this initiative to revitalize 911, and he's tasked Secretary Abalos to make that happen. And for us, it really starts with that leadership. And that's what enables us, or that clears the path for these sorts of good things to happen. And this intelligence that you had mentioned, sort of looking at all the incidents that have transpired and having now, okay, we learned how that typhoon, how we respond to a typhoon. How can we do better? If you have all the data, you can analyze it and you can really find out really specifically based on data how you can do better and what improvements can be made as those come in. But I just wanted to make sure that it's going to evolve, it's going to get smarter, it's going to get better, and the trust in 911, I would say that you should find it no less than that level of trust that's in the United States. That's the amount of attention and intention that your country's leadership has on 911 for the citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned the Philippine National Police earlier, and so they have a command center also for those 911 calls. Like that's already been, that is operational. So for those in Manila, they can call 911 and they're the ones to respond, or how does it go?
The Philippine National Police covers actually national, and then they pass it on to, let's say, that region, that LGU.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, for example, if there's a call from, so you're saying it all is channeled through PNP, and then it is dispatched to a local LGU.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, if I'm in Quezon City, they're going to answer it, and then they will dispatch the LGU in Quezon City.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. For all those who are curious and how it goes.
And they sit next to each other. So the call comes in on this station, and they triage it. 911, what's your emergency?
Yeah.
Where you're located, validate location, walk through the protocol.
Yeah.
Okay, got a dispatch, and they have the radio dispatch here so that they radio them
Got
directly.
it. There we go. And so that would shorten the response time also very quickly. It will be much shorter. And so that is very reassuring for all monsters who are listening and watching as well, on how NGA 911 is helping the Philippines improve disaster risk prevention, emergency response times as well, and trust, more than anything, trust in the system itself, that it'll actually work for them. So yeah, it's a very, never did I think that we would have 911 here, and now we actually have it. And we have Ishka to thank, of course,
You do.
for
You really do.
and no greater country, I believe, like to implement that than here, considering how you said that we were blessed with natural disasters. We need it, and it's very helpful considering there are so many numbers that we used to be familiar with, when really 911 is the number to dial. And so one of the important parts of NGA's implementation here is through public awareness, of course. That's also why you're here, and letting Filipinos and monsters know that 911, you can dial it and someone will answer and help. So how are you educating Filipinos on this emergency response system?
So I think this is really the job of the LGUs. But what we're doing is we're also trying to work on some, I'd say, public awareness campaigns together with the inputs of the ILG. We're working with the Emergency 911 National Office with Director Fajardo. But what I think we should bring eventually, once 911 is really established, is bring 911 for kids from the U.S. to the Philippines. Because there's this organization there that I talked to. They teach kids how to use 911.
Wow.
So I've tapped them, I'd say, and they were trying to give me like some kind of like educational materials to bring over here. So that's part of our plan.
And I'm sure that we're going to have to translate that also into Filipino, into Tagalog, considering we are so used to like hearing 911, what's your emergency? Is it still 911, what's your emergency here when they answer a call, or is it different?
It's the same.
It's the same thing.
We're wanting to normalize and bring those protocols here.
Okay.
Yeah, the standards that we have over there, because we know that's what works.
Yeah. And then I also read that you wanted to include risk management in college curriculums. So what's the mission behind that? Is it to train college students to respond to these emergencies, or is it really to just familiarize them with risk management, risk prevention?
I think we need to familiarize the students, especially because, you know, a lot of the, I'd say, older generation, they're so used to not having 911, and usually the younger generations are the one who's gonna call for their like parents or grandparents.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually also presented to a college called Masters of Public Safety Administration.
Nice.
I'd say 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what the people, I mean, the students there are actually mostly government officials, mayors, vice mayors, undersecretaries, and they want to learn more about 911 and emergency response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, I guess it's also a reflection of their leadership and the
Yes.
mission that they have, being on the same page of wanting to help, how else they can help
Yeah.
Filipinos. And so, did you want to add anything to that
No,
as
no,
well?
that was good.
Okay, and so I was wondering, is there any contingency, like for example, if there's a backlog of emergency calls and there aren't that many people, there aren't enough dispatchers to answer, is it just really to get through the call as much as possible? But again, it's like, what's the situation? What would be the contingency if there's so many people when like maybe one or a few of them have big emergencies that they're talking them through?
So this is part of the, first, it's a great question. It's a problem that plagued the legacy system because the legacy system was based on wireline technology,
Yeah.
which is analog, which is inflexible, and you can't, once you deliver a call to a place, it's really just stuck there. Unlike Next Generation 911, we can deliver a call to Center A. Doesn't matter where it's at. And that center has, let's say, 10 dispatchers or 10 call takers. And that's okay Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Fridays they get a little bit busy. But all of a sudden, something happens on a Saturday and all 10 are busy, and which, by the way, we can see through the analytics the trends. So the staffing can be done according to the trends in the calls.
Yeah.
But you have these situations where, you know, this is life, right? Things happen. So there could be a case where you have an excess number of calls. You have all 10 call takers busy or 50 call takers busy, and you got another 100 calls that need to be handled.
Right.
They're intended for that center, but because it's next gen, you can take that call and you can redirect it to a center that is less busy.
Okay.
So we imagine that the entire nation will be on next gen, which means that you have all the call takers across the nation kind of having each other's back.
Yeah.
So you may have a busy time in Quezon, but a little bit further north, there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
It's crickets. It's
I
slow.
see.
So you can deliver calls there. They can triage them, and really supplement the call taking capabilities.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, that's also, what do you call this? It's a great way of like solving that backlog for sure. And it makes a lot of sense too, because it's like there are other LGUs or command centers also all around that could help. If one has a backlog, then they're there to respond as well. The other command centers are there to respond as well if they're experiencing slower operations. What about a contingency if, for example, there's a power outage or like internet disruption, let's say? How to go about that?
It's the same concept.
Rerouting.
Rerouting, exactly. So this center's down, reroute. You're trying to deliver it. It actually comes back with an error message. There's an action. It says error, say 486, something like that. That's here. So based on that error message, you say, oh, well, their backup center, or their neighbor, or their partner, or their, failover center is Center B. So you redirect all their calls to Center B.
I see. Okay, it's all planned out.
And it happens automatically. All of that
Yeah.
happens automatically with Next Generation 911.
That's amazing. And so finally, we are nearing the end of the show, but I want to ask, so for Don and for Ishka, what advancements are you hoping to see in public safety communications in the foreseeable future? It can be just in general for NGA 911, and then for Ishka here in the Philippines as well.
So I think in the Philippines, we want to see that everyone knows, trusts, and feels comfortable dialing 911. That's a big win.
Yeah. For sure.
and the hard work is already done to ensure that the technology is in place to route those calls. And then once you're able to experience that and have a good user, we call it user experience with interacting with 911, some of the technologies that we can start to bring to bear is, suppose, for example, you are reporting something you're observing. And what the 911 center will be able to do is to trigger, will basically be able to send you a link that you can click on that can start to stream video to the command center from your phone.
Yeah.
And that can be integrated with all the other CCTV cameras that are throughout the city as well.
Amazing.
So I think, given that we've got location, many things can happen.
Yeah.
I can see the ideal. I'll finish where I left off, and then Ishka can supplement that, or I'll finish where I started, which was it started for me with that patent about personal response. What I believe we'll be able to do or realize is something that is I think every person has the desire and willingness to help each other. I think that what technology gives us the ability to do is to realize that desire. So I believe that when someone needs help, technology can be applied, and we're talking future, right? There's some hurdles that need to go through.
Right.
But given the right application of technology, and we know how to get there, that when someone needs help, there is a massive response to them. That means not only the professionals, not only are you dialing 911 to reach a professional who can dispatch a police officer who's trained to deal with violence and aggression, or an EMS person who's trained to deal with your body, or a firefighter who knows how to put out fires. Those are the professionals. There's another aspect, another dynamic here where there are just people who care about people. So sometimes you just need some friends who you didn't know were friends just to know that you needed some help.
Yeah.
And they're 50 meters away. They just don't know that you need help, right? So I imagine a situation where we are all covering each other's back.
Yeah, and that NGA911 would be there to help supplement that. Once these people who care about you and want to help, then make the call if you do need that kind of help.
So adding to what he said, we should be able to text to 911, send photos, videos to 911, FaceTime 911, and actually on top of that, you know how a lot of people are buying smart devices right now. So this is a smartwatch and a smart ring. Should be able to a smart ring.
Whoa, okay.
So in the future, eventually, I think you should be able to detect the pulse. Hey, if something's wrong with the pulse here, it can trigger a call to 911, as well as this one. Yeah.
Does it also
works pretty.
Is it for pulse also, or what
Yeah,
is it?
pulse, oximeter, all of that. Yeah, but I think another thing is wearable devices, especially for the lolos and the lolas.
Yeah.
Right? So let's say in the U.S., they wear this thing called Life Alert.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so we're also trying to bring that in the country, especially for the elderly. Because sometimes the lolos and the lolas, they're just left at home. Right. So if they have something wearable like that, or even like a band like this, you press that, it can trigger a 911 call with a location. Yeah, because of course there's a technology gap and all of that, so it's just one red button here or here.
Yeah.
So a lot of plans.
Right. A lot of plans. It's just trying to get point A to point B
Yes.
at this point in time. But thank you very much, Don and Ishka, for sharing what NGA 911 is, what it's offering here in the Philippines, that it's already live here in the Philippines, and that we can dial 911 and have people help and respond to whatever distress that we are encountering in our lives. And according to Don also, if you feel uncomfortable, if something isn't right, dial 911, because there's nothing like what's your what do you call you don't lose anything from calling 911.
Correct.
Yeah. So there we go. Thank you very much to all the monsters who are listening as well and watching on our live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. That is it for Heard on Thursdays. And any last messages from you guys, or?
Just a great program. Thank you very much for having us on, and we're delighted to share what's coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. It's really an honor.
Of course, and the honor is all mine, really, to learn more also about 911 and, that we have this response now in the Philippines. We really very much appreciate it, and that is it for Heard on Thursdays. Keep it locked only here on The Monster. Good night.
Monster exclusive interview. Monster exclusive interview. Only from Manila's hottest. Monster RX93.1.